the silence between them. The mornings always began the same way, quiet, measured, and hollow. Elena Whitmore stood on the wooden porch, her fingers resting lightly against the railing as the desert stretched endlessly before her. The land glowed beneath the rising sun, all golden dust, as if the world itself had been painted to look alive. But she felt none of it. The wind brushed against her face, soft and warm, yet carried no comfort. Only the reminder that everything moved forward while she remained still. Behind her, the door creaked open. Nathan Whitmore stepped out without urgency, fastening the cuffs of his worn shirt as he glanced briefly toward the horizon. He did not look at her. He never did, not in the way she silently wished for. His attention lingered on practical things, the weather, the land, the work ahead. Things that could be measured, controlled, completed. Storm might come by nightfall, he said, his voice even detached. Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure why. The sky was clear. There was no sign of rain. Nathan adjusted the leather belt at his waist and stepped past her, his shoulder nearly brushing hers without acknowledgement. That small, almost touch lingered longer than any of his words ever did. Then he descended the steps and walked toward the barn, his figure already blending into the routine of the day. She watched him go, as she always did, until distance swallowed him whole. There had been a time when she believed marriage would feel different, warmer, fuller, alive with something unspoken yet understood. Instead, it felt like this, a series of quiet mornings and quieter nights, where words existed only out of necessity and silence filled everything else. Inside the house, the air was still. Elena moved through the rooms with careful familiarity, her hands tracing the edges of furniture as if grounding herself in something tangible. She prepared breakfast out of habit, though Nathan rarely returned to eat it. The table remained set longer than necessary, 2 plates untouched, a silent ritual of expectation that was never fulfilled. She paused by the window, her gaze drifting outward again. That was when she noticed him. He stood at the far edge of the property, near the fence line where the land began to blur into something less defined. A stranger, unmistakably so. His posture was relaxed yet alert, as though he belonged to the land in a way others did not. Dark hair fell over his shoulders, and even at a distance, there was something steady in the way he held himself, something that resisted the emptiness she had grown used to. Elena's breath caught, though she couldn't say why. He turned slightly, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes met. It was brief, no more than a second, but it felt longer. Long enough for her to sense something unfamiliar, something that stirred quietly beneath the surface of her carefully contained life. Then he looked away, returning his attention to whatever task had brought him there. The moment ended, yet its weight remained. Elena stepped back from the window, her pulse unsettled. It was nothing, she told herself, just a stranger passing through. People came and went all the time. It meant nothing, and yet the stillness of the house seemed different now, as if something had shifted in the space between her thoughts. Later that afternoon, Margaret Hale arrived unannounced, as she often did. She carried with her the scent of lavender and the sharp awareness of someone who noticed more than she said. "You've been keeping to yourself again," Margaret remarked, settling into a chair without invitation. Elena offered a faint smile. "There isn't much to say." "There's always something to say," Margaret replied, studying her with quiet intensity. "It's just a matter of whether anyone's listening." The words lingered longer than intended. Elena turned away, busying her hands with tasks that required no thought. "Nathan listens." Margaret didn't argue. She didn't need to. The truth existed plainly in the spaces Elena avoided. "Loneliness," Margaret said after a pause, "has a way of convincing people that even the smallest kindness means more than it should." Elena stilled, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the table. "I'm not lonely," she said, though the words felt rehearsed. Margaret's gaze softened, but she said nothing more. When evening came, the sky burned with color before fading into a deep, endless blue. Nathan returned late, his movements as predictable as ever. He ate in silence, spoke only when necessary, and retired without ceremony. Elena remained awake long after. She stepped onto the porch once more, the night air cooler now, carrying the distant hum of the land settling into darkness. Her eyes drifted toward the horizon, toward the place where she had seen him earlier. He was there again, this time closer. The faint outline of his figure stood just beyond the reach of the porch light, neither approaching nor retreating, watching perhaps, or simply existing in the same space, separated by more than distance. Elena felt it then, that quiet, undeniable shift within her. Not love, not even desire. Something smaller, more dangerous. Awareness. Her lips parted slightly as a thought surfaced, unbidden and impossible to ignore. I've never been kissed, not in a way that meant anything. The realization startled her, as though it had been waiting patiently for the right moment to reveal itself. She looked toward the stranger again, her heart unsteady in a way she did not understand. And for the first time in years, the silence around her did not feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something, the space between words. The following morning did not feel like the others. Elena noticed it before she could name it, a subtle disturbance in the rhythm she had long accepted as unchangeable. The same sun rose over the same endless stretch of land, and yet something beneath the surface had shifted. She moved through her routine with quiet precision, but her attention no longer belonged to the tasks at hand. It lingered elsewhere, drawn toward a presence she had no reason to seek. Nathan spoke little as always. His words came and went without weight, absorbed into the silence that defined their shared space. When he left, the absence he created felt no different than when he was there. Elena remained on the porch longer than usual. She told herself she was watching the horizon, measuring the weather as Nathan often did. But her gaze drifted, almost against her will, toward the edge of the property. He was there, closer than before. The man stood near the fence, repairing a loose post with steady, deliberate movements. His presence no longer felt accidental. There was purpose in the way he worked, in the quiet confidence of his posture. He did not hurry, nor did he linger unnecessarily. He simply existed in the space as though he belonged to it. Elena hesitated before stepping down from a porch. Each movement felt measured, as though she were crossing an invisible boundary she could not yet see. The dry earth crunched softly beneath her shoes as she approached, her pulse steady but heightened with an awareness she could not dismiss. He noticed her before she spoke. His gaze lifted, meeting hers with calm recognition. There was no surprise in his expression, only a quiet acknowledgement that felt both grounding and unsettling. "You're far from the house," he said. His voice was low, even carrying no expectation. Elena paused a few steps away, her hands loosely clasped before her. I could say the same. A faint trace of something, amusement, perhaps, touched his expression, though it faded quickly. "I was asked to help mend the fencing," he replied. "Your husband mentioned it needed work." Of course he had. Nathan would notice something like that. He always did. Elena nodded, though her focus remained fixed on the man before her. Up close, there was a stillness about him that felt deliberate, as though he carried his silence differently than she did. Where hers felt empty, his seemed full, measured, intentional. "I didn't see you arrive," she said. "I came before sunrise." The answer was simple, yet it lingered. She searched for something more to say, something that would justify her presence there, but the words did not come easily. "I'm Elena," she offered after a moment. He studied her briefly, as though weighing the significance of the introduction. "Kai," he said. The name settled between them, unfamiliar yet grounding. A quiet stretched out, but it did not feel uncomfortable. It felt present, as though something unspoken moved beneath it, waiting for shape. Elena became aware of the distance between them. Not far, but close enough to notice the detail she had missed before. The way his hands moved with quiet precision, the steadiness in his gaze, the absence of anything forced or performative. "You don't speak much," she said, surprising herself. Kai glanced at the post he had been repairing, then back at her. only when there's something worth saying. The words were not dismissive. If anything, they carried a quiet honesty that unsettled her more than indifference would have. Elena let out a small breath, her gaze drifting briefly toward the open land before returning to him. And is there something worth saying now? Kai held her gaze a moment longer than expected. That depends, he replied. Are you asking to be heard? The question struck deeper than she anticipated. Elena felt it immediately, the shift from something casual into something far more personal. Her instinct was to retreat, to offer a polite response, and return to the safety of her routine. But the words did not come. Instead, she found herself answering truthfully. I don't think anyone's asked me that before. Kai said nothing, but his silence felt different now. It invited rather than dismissed. Elena lowered her gaze, suddenly aware of how easily the moment had unfolded, how quickly she had stepped beyond the boundaries she had long maintained. I should go, she said quietly. Kai nodded once, not stopping her. She turned, retracing her steps toward the house. The distance felt longer now, each step carrying the weight of something newly understood. She had not said much, and yet it felt as though something had been revealed, something she had kept hidden even from herself. By the time she reached the porch, she could still feel it. That awareness, that pull. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Nathan returned as expected, his presence unchanged, his words as measured as ever. Elena responded where necessary, but her thoughts remained elsewhere, circling a conversation that had been brief yet impossibly significant. That night, sleep did not come easily. When she finally stepped outside, the air carried a quiet stillness that mirrored the one within her. She did not intend to look for him. She told herself that as she moved toward the edge of the porch. But he was there, not as distant as before, closer, waiting, or perhaps simply present in the same way he had been earlier, unmoving, unforced. Elena hesitated, her breath catching in a way she could no longer ignore. I shouldn't be here, she said, though she made no move to leave. Kai's gaze remained steady. Then why are you? The question lingered, unanswered. Elena felt it then, that quiet fracture within her certainty. I don't know, she admitted. The truth settled between them, fragile yet undeniable. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, Kai stepped closer. Not enough to close the distance, just enough to change it. Elena's breath hitched, her pulse quickening as the space between them shifted into something charged, something no longer neutral. Her voice came softer now, barely above a whisper. I've never been kissed, she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Not in a way that meant anything. The admission hung in the air, exposed and irreversible. Kai did not react immediately. He simply watched her, as though considering not just her words, but the weight behind them. Then, quietly, he stepped closer still. Not touching. Not yet. Then we begin slow, he said. The space between them narrowed to something fragile, something impossible to ignore. And Elena realized, with a certainty that both frightened and compelled her. She was no longer standing at the edge. She had already crossed into something she could not easily leave behind. The moment that changed everything. After that night, distance became impossible. Elena tried to restore the quiet order of her life, but the effort felt hollow, like repeating words that had lost their meaning. Every task she performed carried a faint distraction. Every moment of stillness filled with something unspoken pressing against her thoughts. The space between what was and what had begun to form refused to settle. Kai did not come to the porch the following evening. The absence should have brought relief. Instead, it unsettled her more than his presence ever had. She found herself watching the horizon without intending to, her attention drawn outward in a way she could neither justify nor suppress. By the third day, she stopped pretending. The sun stood high when she crossed the property, her steps deliberate, her breath measured. She told herself she only needed clarity, that whatever had stirred between them required definition before it grew into something uncontrollable. But beneath that reasoning, there was something simpler, far more honest. She wanted to see him. Kai was near the far fence again, his movements as steady as before, as though nothing had changed. But when he looked up and saw her approaching, something in his stillness shifted, not surprise, but recognition. "You came back," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena stopped a few feet away, aware of how familiar the distance had already become. "I needed to understand something." Kai waited, offering no interruption. Elena hesitated, searching for words that would not betray the weight behind them. What happened the other night, it shouldn't have. Kai studied her carefully, and yet it did. The simplicity of his response unsettled her more than denial would have. "I'm married," she said, the words firm but quieter than she intended. "That should be enough to stop this." Kai's expression did not harden, nor did it soften. "Is it enough for you?" The question landed with quiet precision. Elena felt it immediately, the fracture between what she believed she should feel and what she actually did. Her instinct was to defend the life she had built, to insist on its value, its stability. But the truth lingered too close to the surface. "I don't know," she admitted. Kai nodded slightly, as though the answer was expected. A silence followed, but it was no longer neutral. It carried tension, fragile and undeniable, stretching between them like something waiting to break. "You should go back," Kai said after a moment, "before this becomes something harder to leave behind." Elena's gaze lifted sharply to his. "And you?" she asked. "Will you leave?" Kai glanced briefly toward the open land before returning his attention to her. "I was never meant to stay." The words settled heavily. Elena felt a sudden, unexpected resistance rise within her. The idea of him leaving, of this connection ending before it had fully formed, felt sharper than it should have. "Then why does it feel like you already have?" she asked quietly. Kai did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer. The movement was subtle, but it altered everything. The distance between them, once cautious, now felt deliberate, charged with something neither of them could ignore. "Elena," he said, her name carrying a weight that made her breath catch. "You're standing in a place where every step forward costs something." "I know," she whispered, but she didn't move back. The truth of that choice settled between them, clear and irreversible. Kai lifted his hand slowly, as though giving her time to stop him. When she didn't, his fingers brushed lightly against her cheek. The touch was gentle, almost tentative, yet it carried more meaning than anything she had known before. Elena closed her eyes briefly, the sensation grounding and overwhelming all at once. There was no urgency in it, no force, only a quiet acknowledgement of something that had been building since the moment they first met. When she opened her eyes, he was closer, close enough that the space between them no longer felt like distance. Her breath faltered. This was the moment she could still turn away, the moment where everything remained intact, where the line she had lived by could still be restored. But the silence behind her had never offered her anything, and the presence before her now felt impossibly real. Kai's gaze searched hers once more, as though asking a final question without words. Elena didn't speak. She didn't need to. The answer was already there. Slowly, carefully, he leaned in. The first contact was barely there, a soft, uncertain meeting of lips that carried more hesitation than certainty. But it was enough. Enough to shift something deep within her, something she had kept buried beneath years of quiet acceptance. Elena felt it unfold all at once. Not just the kiss, but everything behind it. The longing, the absence, the unspoken need to feel something genuine. It wasn't overwhelming or consuming. It was steady, deliberate, and achingly real. When they pulled back, the world felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just changed. Elena's breath came unevenly as she stepped back, her hand rising instinctively to her lips. The weight of what had just happened settled over her, undeniable and immediate. "We shouldn't have done that," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Kai didn't move toward her again. "No," he agreed. "We shouldn't have." The agreement did nothing to undo it. Elena looked at him, searching for something, regret, certainty, direction, but found only the same steady presence that had drawn her in from the beginning. I can't pretend this didn't happen, she said. Kai nodded. You won't be able to. The honesty in his voice left no room for comfort. A distant sound broke the moment. The faint creak of movement near the house, carried across the still air. Elena's heart tightened. Nathan. The reality of her life rushed back all at once, colliding with the moment she stood in now. She turned quickly, her gaze fixed on the house in the distance, its familiar shape suddenly unfamiliar in what it represented. I have to go, she said. Kai didn't stop her, but as she began to walk away, his voice reached her one last time. This doesn't end quietly. Elena paused, her chest tightening at the truth in his words. She didn't look back, because she already knew. Nothing about this could remain hidden forever. What remains after? Nothing returned to the way it had been. Elena felt at the moment she stepped back into the house, the subtle but irreversible shift that had taken place within her. The walls stood where they always had, the furniture unchanged, the air just as still. And yet, everything felt unfamiliar, as though she were moving through a life she no longer fully belonged to. Nathan sat at the table when she entered. He didn't look up immediately, but there was a pause in his movements that hadn't been there before. A hesitation. It was small, nearly imperceptible, yet Elena noticed it instantly. You were gone longer than usual, he said. His tone remained even, but something beneath it had changed. Elena removed her shawl slowly, buying herself time she didn't truly have. I walked further than I intended. Nathan nodded once, though his gaze lingered on her now. Not with warmth, not with curiosity, but with a quiet scrutiny that unsettled her more than indifference ever had. Be careful, he said. It's easy to lose your way out there. The words carried a weight that extended beyond the land. Elena lowered her gaze. I know. The conversation ended as abruptly as it began, yet the silence that followed felt different. It no longer rested comfortably between them. It pressed, insistent and heavy, as though demanding acknowledgement. That night, sleep did not come. Elena lay awake, staring into the darkness, her thoughts unraveling in quiet repetition. The memory of the kiss lingered, not just the act itself, but what it had awakened within her. It had not been reckless or hurried. It had been deliberate, undeniable. And now, there was no space left for denial. By morning, the weight of it had settled into something sharper. She moved through her routine with practiced precision, but every movement felt hollow, disconnected from the truth she carried. Nathan watched her more closely now, though he said nothing. His silence had changed. It was no longer empty. It was observant. Elena could feel it. The shift between them was no longer hers alone. By midday, she could no longer remain inside. The air beyond the house felt tighter, as though the land itself held its breath. She stepped onto the porch, her gaze instinctively drawn toward the horizon. Kai stood there, not at the far edge this time, closer, waiting. Elena hesitated only a moment before descending the steps. Each movement felt heavier now, no longer guided by curiosity, but by consequence. The distance between them closed quickly, as though it had been shrinking all along. You shouldn't have come, she said when she reached him. Kai's expression remained steady. Neither should you. The words settled between them, stripped of pretense. Elena exhaled slowly, her composure slipping despite her effort to maintain it. This can't continue, she said. What happened? It was a mistake. Kai studied her, not dismissing the statement, but not accepting it either. Was it? Elena's gaze faltered. It changes nothing. It changes everything, he replied quietly. The truth of it struck deeper than she wanted to admit. Elena turned away slightly, her eyes fixed on the distant outline of the house. Nathan knows something is wrong, she said. He hasn't said it, but I can see it. I can feel it. Kai said nothing. He doesn't ask questions, she continued, her voice tightening. He just watches. And somehow that's worse. Silence followed, but it no longer offered refuge. What do you want? Kai asked after a moment. The question lingered, heavier than any before it. Elena opened her mouth to answer, but the words didn't come. Want felt like a dangerous thing now, something that led only to loss, no matter which direction she chose. I don't know, she admitted finally. Kai stepped closer, though not as near as before. The space between them remained charged, but restrained, held back by the reality neither could ignore. "You do," he said. "You're just deciding what it will cost you." Elena's breath caught. The simplicity of his words stripped away every defense she had tried to build. There was no easy path forward, no version of this that left everything intact. Whatever she chose, something would be lost. "I can't leave," she said, though the words felt uncertain even as she spoke them. Kai nodded once. "Then you stay." "And you?" she asked, her voice quieter now. He glanced toward the horizon, where the land stretched beyond anything familiar. "I go." The finality in his answer settled heavily between them. Elena felt it then, not just the weight of what had happened, but the inevitability of its end. Whatever this was, whatever it had become, it was never meant to last. It had existed in a space outside of her life, separate from the reality she would have to return to. "That's it?" she asked softly. "We just walk away?" Kai met her gaze one last time. "There was never a path for us to walk together." The truth of it left no room for argument. Elena swallowed, her chest tightening as the moment stretched between them. She wanted to say something more, to hold on to it, to give it meaning beyond what it had already taken. But the words felt unnecessary now. Some things did not need to be explained. They simply ended. Kai stepped back first. The distance returned slowly, deliberately, until it felt insurmountable again. He did not turn away immediately, but when he did, it was without hesitation. Elena watched him go, just as she had watched Nathan so many times before. But this felt different, because this time she understood what she was losing. When she finally turned back toward the house, the weight of her choice settled fully into place. The structure stood unchanged, waiting for her return, just as it always had. But she was not the same woman who had once stood on its porch, believing silence was something she could live with. Now it was something she had chosen. Elena paused at the threshold, her hand resting lightly against the door. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel everything: the longing, the regret, the quiet understanding of what could never be undone. Then she stepped inside, and the door closed behind her, not as an ending, but as the beginning of a life she would now have to learn how to live.